Good afternoon. My name is Joe Schellenkamp. I'm a team leader here in Region Three's grant management section. Our office reviews and processes every grant action that comes through Region 3, and we also provide guidance and support to all the other program offices, such as the Air Division, the Water Division, Land and Chemical, and even the EJ Division. Last year, we processed over 660 grant actions, totaling over $1.5 billion. Here today to talk about applying for and managing an EPA grant is Vanessa Davies. Vanessa is a grant management specialist. She focuses on some of our water programs, the Inflation Reduction Act grants, and some of the EJ programs as well. Before coming to EPA, she also worked with small and large nonprofits, including many institutions of higher education. Take it away, Vanessa.
So thank you all for joining Joe and me today for our session on Grants Funding 101. Success is in the bag. I am Vanessa Davies. I'm a grants management specialist in EPA's Region 3, and I'm very happy to talk with you today about how to find, apply for, and manage EPA assistance agreements. An assistance agreement is a legal instrument that EPA uses to transfer anything of value, in this case, we're talking about funding, to a recipient to accomplish a public purpose. An assistance agreement can be either a grant or a cooperative agreement. The difference between those two things is the level of federal involvement. With a grant, there is no anticipation of substantial federal involvement. With a cooperative agreement, there is an anticipation of substantial federal involvement. So grants and cooperative agreements are both assistance agreements. So here's a look at the agenda today. I will talk to you about how to find and apply for EPA assistance agreements. I will give you some tips on how to stay informed about funding opportunities. I'll walk you through the application and award process. I'll talk to you about how to create a budget detail. I'll run through a few of the best practices for award management. And at the end, we will leave some time for Q&A. Joe is going to help me out with that. The slide deck that I'm using will be available for you after the end of today's sessions. All of the links in it are live. I have checked all of them for you. So please do use this slide deck as a resource as you prepare to apply for funding opportunities. So speaking of resources, here are quite a few resources, all with links for you to go and look at. We'll be talking about a lot of these topics today, but I'll only be able to talk about them briefly. So these resources will give you much more information. On the left are trainings that EPA has developed on topics such as how to apply for a funding opportunity, how to create a budget, how to close out an award when the project is finished. Those are modules that you can move through. On the right are webinars that EPA has prepared on a variety of topics, and you can see from the dates that those webinars are posted. They were all done in the last year, year and a half. This is very current and up-to-date information. So please, at your leisure, feel free to look at any of these resources. So I want to begin today by talking to you about a new training requirement for new applicants and new recipients. This is a training requirement that must be completed prior to receiving funds. If you are unsure as to whether or not your organization is a new applicant or a new recipient, there's a way you can check up on that. I'll give you the short answer here. A new applicant, new recipient is an organization that has never received an EPA assistance agreement before, or an organization who last received an EPA assistance agreement prior to federal fiscal year 2015. That's prior to October 1st, 2014. So again, if you're unsure whether or not your organization would qualify as a new applicant, new recipient, you can go to the website usaspending.gov and check on the status of the organization there. I've put a link on this slide to instructions that will walk you through that process of doing that check. The actual training that is required are those 2 sets of modules that I mentioned on the previous slide. Only 1 staff person at the organization is required to complete the training. And I should say that even if you are not a new applicant, new recipient, you're encouraged to take these trainings because there is a tremendous amount of useful information there. So now I'm going to give you a brief overview of the application process, and then I'll walk you more slowly through the steps. The process begins when EPA prepares the Notice of Funding Opportunity. EPA posts the funding opportunity on a website called grants.gov. During the open period, that's when EPA is receiving applications. When the open period closes, EPA evaluates the applications and makes selections. And then EPA issues awards. So if you're new to EPA assistance agreements, if you're not sure, for example, what types of programs EPA offers, or if you're looking for general information, you want to start with the website sam.gov. That is System for Award Management, sam.gov. If you go to sam.gov, you can see the landing page here, and there's an arrow pointing to the link for assistance listings. You can click on the assistance listings link to see a whole list of assistance listings, which are public descriptions of federal programs that provide assistance. So if you're familiar with the old term CFDA listings, that's the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance, those are now called assistance listings. Also on this slide at the bottom, I have provided a link for a list of EPA's competitive grant programs. So that's another place you could go just to sort of look at what types of grant programs are out there. When you are ready to look at open funding opportunities, these are opportunities that are currently accepting applications. There are 2 ways you can go about doing that. The first is to go to the website I mentioned, grants.gov. That's the website where you will actually apply for a funding opportunity. Grants.gov lists all open funding opportunities for all federal agencies. So you'll want to use the search feature or use some filters to narrow down what you're seeing there, and I'll show you how to do all of that. The second place you can go is to the actual program office website. If you know of an EPA program that you'd be interested in working with, you can go directly to that program's website. They may list open funding opportunities there. And if it is listed on the program's website, it will also be listed in grants.gov. I should say that grants.gov is not an EPA specific site. So if there are any technical issues that you encounter while using that site, you will want to reach out to the grants.gov help desk. So here we are on the landing page of grants.gov. To find funding opportunities here, you want to use the search grants function. You see the arrow pointing to that over on the left. There you will see a list of all of the open funding opportunities, and I'll show you how to narrow that. The funding opportunities will provide all of the information you need to apply. They will tell you the deadlines, the required materials, all of the information you need will be there. If you'd like, you can click the connect button on the home page, and that's the arrow on the right there. And with the connect button, this will sign you up for automatic notifications so that when a funding opportunity is posted, you will be notified of that. And I'll talk a little more about that as well. So when you click that search grants button on grants.gov, this is what you'll see. It's an incredibly long list of open funding opportunities. You can see at the top where the arrow is, there is a box where you can type in a keyword to narrow your search. There are filters that go down the left side of the page. You can see the arrow at the bottom points to the agency filter. So you can click the box next to EPA, and that will show you only the open funding opportunities at EPA. I want to caution you against using the eligibility filter because sometimes with funding opportunities, eligibility will be listed as other. And so if you were to click some of these boxes in eligibility, you might accidentally remove funding opportunities that your organization is actually eligible to apply for. It's just that it's listed as other. So stay away from the eligibility filter, use the other filters, use the keyword search, and that will help you narrow down your search. Once you locate an open funding opportunity that sounds of interest, please be sure to read it very carefully start to finish, because each funding opportunity has its own set of instructions, its own set of requirements. So you want to read all of that information very carefully. Many of these funding opportunities are only open for a short period of time, usually around 45 days. So you'll want to search here frequently to see what are open funding opportunities in order to give yourself the maximum time possible to prepare the application materials. If an announcement has been modified, those changes will be posted to grants.gov. And again, if you sign up for automatic notifications, you can get notified when a posting has been changed. So this is what an open funding opportunity looks like. On grants.gov, you can see the arrows on the right tell us that this is the 4th version of this particular funding opportunity. It was last updated in March 2024. And if you were to click the version history button over on the right, that would actually show you what had been changed with this funding announcement. So here are links to subscribe for email notifications from grants.gov. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. You can set up searches and save those parameters such that when funding opportunities that match your search parameters are posted, you're notified. You can customize the kinds of alerts that you receive from grants.gov about funding opportunities so that the alerts best serve your own purposes. So before you apply for an open funding opportunity, you must register at both sam.gov and grants.gov. I recommend that you start the process now because it can take some time. I'm going to walk you through it very quickly, and then I'll take it more slowly. sam.gov, I said, is the system for award management. You want to register your entity in sam.gov, and that's where you search for assistance listings. Grants.gov, you register your entity there, you create an account, you set up a workspace. That is where you apply for funding opportunities and submit the application. So let's go through it more slowly. First, you go to sam.gov. The first step at sam.gov is to get a UEI. That's a unique entity ID. That is a 12-character alphanumeric value. It's possible that your organization has a UEI, but not a sam.gov registration. You need both of those things. So you want to check your organization's records, make sure that you have both a UEI and a SAM.gov registration. If you don't have both of those things, you want to get started on that process right away. Then we go to grants.gov. So you have the UEI, you've registered in SAM.gov, then you register your organization in grants.gov. And I've put a link on this slide to a video that will walk you through the process of registering in grants.gov. When you register there, you will name what's called an eBiz POC. That's an e-business point of contact. You will delegate roles to other users in your organization. You will set up a workspace. The workspace in grants.gov is where you complete and submit applications for funding opportunities. So once again, you want to go to sam.gov, get a UEI, register in sam.gov, register in grants.gov, and then you're ready to apply for funding opportunities. When you are applying for a funding opportunity, you may have some questions. There will be a point of contact listed on the notice of funding opportunity. You can reach out to that point of contact for certain questions. But EPA strives to ensure that all competitive funding rounds are run fairly and ethically, giving all organizations an equal opportunity to receive funding. So we are restricted in the way that we can communicate with applicants. If you have questions about whether or not your organization is eligible to apply for a particular funding opportunity, you can reach out to the point of contact on the notice of funding opportunity and ask that. If you need a little bit of clarity on some of the administrative aspects of the application, you can reach out to the point of contact and ask that. EPA cannot help you write your application, nor can we review or comment on applications. We can't provide information about how applications are evaluated outside of the information that is already listed in the notice of funding opportunity. We cannot provide any organization with a competitive advantage over another. We want all organizations to have an equal opportunity to receive funding. When that open period of the funding opportunity has closed, then applications are reviewed and determined to be either eligible or ineligible. An ineligible application would be, for example, if an application was submitted, but it was missing some of the required forms. That would be deemed ineligible. All eligible applications are reviewed by EPA program offices. They are evaluated based on scoring criteria, and selections are made according to the factors that are listed in the notice of funding opportunity. Applicants who were ineligible or who were not selected are notified, and they have a short window, about 15 days, to request a debriefing. A debriefing is a very useful thing. It can tell you what the strengths of the application were. It can point you towards areas that you might want to change for the next time around. Selected applicants are also notified, and they go through a period of additional review to ensure compliance with administrative and programmatic requirements. So this is a very important point. The notification of selection is not a signal to begin work on the project. At that point, funds have not been legally obligated to the project. I mentioned that there is a period of secondary review that occurs after that. That period can take a number of months, depending on what issues arise. During that period of time, the applicant is working closely with the grant specialist and the project officer. It is only when an award agreement has been signed by an EPA award official that federal funds are then legally obligated to the project. Any costs incurred outside of the project period on the award agreement are costs incurred at the recipient's own risk. If you're unsure of when you can begin work, reach out to your project officer for clarification. Nonprofit applicants selected for awards that exceed $200,000 are required to obtain pre-award certification. This process ensures that nonprofit recipients have adequate administrative systems in place to manage funds. If this requirement applies to your organization, EPA will reach out to initiate this process after you have been notified of selection. It's important to respond in a timely manner to these queries because the process of pre-award certification can take some time. So here are some key takeaways of this section of my talk. To find general grant program information, go to sam.gov and search on assistance listings. To find and apply for open funding opportunities, go to grants.gov. Before you submit an application, you must have both a sam.gov and a grants.gov registration. If you haven't started that process, I recommend you do so now. A notice of selection is not a signal to start a project. You must wait until the official award agreement has been signed before beginning work. And nonprofits that receive awards over $200,000 must go through pre-award certification. So now let's talk about how to stay informed. On this slide is a link to an EPA grants listserv. This is an email that will provide you with all sorts of grants-related information, such as new guidance, new trainings and webinars that are posted online, changes to grants requirements. So you can sign up for that email. You have these resources that I listed on the earlier slide. And you have some additional resources here on competition, on grants.gov, and on RAINs. RAINs are the recipient applicant information notice. This is how new guidance, new resources, and other information are communicated. There's a link on this slide to a website that will list all of the RAINs. So now let's go through the application and award process. We'll start with one of my favorite things, a visual aid. So this flow chart shows you the process from the time that the applicant receives the notification of selection until the award is signed. So I mentioned this period of secondary review when the applicant works closely with the project officer, that's the PO, and the grant specialist, that's the GS. During this time, the PO and the GS may ask the applicant to revise some of the application documents. If, for example, there's, let's say, an error in the work plan, if, say, there's an issue with the way that costs have been categorized in the budget, the PO or the GS will reach out to the applicant and they will request revised documents. Once the entire application has been submitted for review, then the award can be created. It's routed for signature and approvals. So these are the main components of the application package. You'll see there are many forms listed here: the work plan, the budget detail or budget narrative, an indirect cost rate agreement, which may or may not be required depending on the application. There's a link at the bottom of the slide to a page that has blank fillable PDF versions of these forms. So you can go to that site, you can access the forms. Many of the forms also have separate instruction packets. So if you need help understanding how to fill out the form, check out those instruction packets. So we'll go through the application package step by step, starting with the work plan. The work plan should be based on the guidance in the funding opportunity, and it should be consistent with federal rules, EPA orders, and a variety of other regulations. Briefly speaking, the work plan should have detailed descriptions of outputs and outcomes, timeframes for completing activities, a process for evaluating performance, and a schedule of reporting. And again, if the application is selected for funding, the work plan will be reviewed and the applicant may be asked to revise certain aspects of it. The budget is the breakdown of the project's costs into various categories. Costs listed in the budget must be allowable. And if you're unsure whether or not a cost is allowable, there is an excellent resource linked to on this slide. It's called 2 CFR 200. That's part of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR. It's the part of the Code of Federal Regulations that governs cost principles for federal awards. And I should mention that this very helpful resource will be changing later in 2024, and I will call your attention to some of those changes in the upcoming slides with very large asterisks. So I will alert you to those. The totals in the budget categories, which we're going to walk through in a second, should be in whole dollars only, no cents. So now I'll walk you through the categories. We'll start with personnel and fringe. Personnel are the salaries of all W-2 employees who work on a project. If the person does not receive a W-2, their salary should not be categorized in personnel. It would be categorized elsewhere. The costs listed in personnel should match the staffing plan that is described in the work plan. For fringe benefits, these are costs other than income, things like holiday pay, vacation. Your organization should have a fringe benefits policy that states what is included in fringe, and you should explain that in the budget narrative. If you need help calculating the fringe rate, there is a link on the slide that can help you. Travel is a good faith estimate of travel costs associated with performing the work of the project. This travel must be necessary for W-2 employees to perform the work of the project. If the travel is being done by other people, such as contractors, consultants, interns, fellows, their travel would not be categorized here. It would be categorized elsewhere in the budget. Next, we come up to equipment and supplies. It can be very tricky to determine if an item is equipment or supplies, and there's sort of a simple sort of step one test, and then there are additional layers to the test. So I'll give you the simple step one first. Equipment is a long-term asset with a per unit cost of $5,000 or more and a useful life of more than 1 year. Supplies are shorter-term assets with a per unit cost of less than $5,000. And so this $5,000 threshold that I mentioned, that's one of those things that's going to change later in 2024. That will be $10,000. So that's the simple test for equipment versus supplies. It can be much more complex than that. There are other factors that often need to be taken into consideration to determine if an item is equipment or supplies. I've listed some of those complexities here. If you have questions about it, your grant specialist will help you with this determination. Contracted services are those carried out by an individual or organization other than the recipient, with whom the recipient has established a contractual relationship. In the budget narrative, you should describe the scope of work of the contractor or the services being offered. You should describe the procurement method. You don't need to name specific contractors or consultants in the application. And finally, the other category is what it sounds like. It's for other things that don't fit well in the categories we've just been through. I've listed here a few of those other items that might be in the other category. If the application has a subaward, that will be in the other category. And I've linked here to EPA subaward policy and the subaward frequent questions. If you will have subawards, these are excellent resources to look at to understand subawards. Indirect costs are costs incurred for a common or joint purpose that benefit more than one cost objective. The indirect cost rate must be up to date for the life of the award. Recipients who have never had a negotiated indirect cost rate can use what is called the de minimis rate. That is currently 10%. And this is one of those changes I mentioned coming later in 2024. That will become 15%. And I've included a link here for EPA's indirect cost policy that is very useful if you're new to thinking about indirect costs in terms of grant applications. So here are some key takeaways. Please double check your math. It's very easy for errors to creep into budgets. Use whole dollar amounts only, no cents. The budget narrative should be detailed. It should contain breakdowns according to the cost categories that we've discussed here. I've put links to many resources here to help you create your budget, understand things like participant support costs and subawards, and keep an eye out for those changes to 2 CFR 200 that I mentioned are coming later in 2024. So now we'll talk about best practices for award management. So the application has been selected for funding. It has gone through secondary review. The award document has been created and signed. You have received an award agreement. This is a very happy time. You want to sit down and spend time with your award agreement. Read it thoroughly. There will be terms and conditions there that are specific to your award, and you will have a link to EPA general terms and conditions. A recipient demonstrates their commitment to carry out the award in one of two ways, by either drawing down funds within 21 days or by not filing a notice of disagreement within 21 days. So for example, if there's an error with your award, if you decide you do not want to receive the funding, you must notify the grants office within that 21-day period. The terms and conditions that I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of useful information there, and it's very important for your project. So for example, there will be information on reporting requirements, on drawing funds, all sorts of great topics. So you want to read through your terms and conditions. To remain compliant with your award, you really have to know the terms and conditions and you have to follow them. If you have questions about any of this, you can reach out to your project officer or your grant specialist. Their contact information will be on your award document. After you've received the award agreement, after you have begun work on your EPA-funded project, you will want to access funds. Awarded funds are drawn from a system called ASAP. When you are ready to make a draw from ASAP, be certain that you draw only the amount you need on an immediate cash basis. EPA expects that you will only draw down funds that will be spent within 5 days. Your draws will be monitored by EPA grants and program staff. So again, do not draw all the funds at the same time. Do not draw more funds than what is immediately needed. There will be reporting requirements associated with the award. They will be administrative reports, programmatic reports. The exact types will be listed in the terms and conditions. I'll just run through a few of them here. Any subawards over $30,000 need to be reported on the website fsrs.gov. That's sometimes called FSRS FFATA. If the procurement budget is over $250,000, you may be required to submit what are called DB reports. That is disadvantaged business enterprise reports. There will be annual federal financial reports and a final federal financial report after the end of the project period. So the takeaways from this section, recipients have 21 days to accept an award or to file a disagreement with the award. You want to carefully review all terms and conditions on the award. Only draw the funds for what you need. Do not draw all of the funds at once. And if you have questions, reach out to the project officer or grant specialist. They will be happy to help you. So speaking of help, I have put some links here to sites that I thought might be useful to you. I have put here my contact information. If you have questions about anything that I've said today or about EPA grants in general, please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any questions and you have not already put them in the chat, please go ahead and put them in the chat now. On behalf of myself and Joe, we want to thank you for taking the time to be part of this presentation. We hope that this information better assists you as you apply for funding opportunities with EPA. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions that aren't already answered in the chat? All right, I'm gonna scroll back up and see if I missed any. Okay, here's one. Vanessa, are there any ways to keep track of expected or upcoming grant opportunities?
I would recommend signing up for alerts from grants.gov. One can set up parameters there to say what types of alerts they would receive, and then they can be emailed when those funding opportunities that match their parameters are posted.
Okay. Good info to have. Does anyone else have any other questions? If not, I guess we can end early.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Oh, we have a new question. No, we don't. I'm sorry.
Julie
Psych.
Dietrich just wants to say, nice job. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great afternoon.